What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another video. And yesterday we went over cards that are probably most likely to be banned in Modern and in Pioneer. And we kind of lumped them all together because from the sounds of it we're going to go Scorched Earth on multiple formats. And I'm only assuming those two are going to be the big ones that get hit, mainly because I still believe that they are the most popular competitive formats among competitive players. And, people want those formats to not be garbage because they are going to, I would imagine, prominently be featured in pro tours and things like that and all competitive events moving forward at a local scale and at a large scale, as long as they continue to be popular. And they can only continue to be popular if we try to make the format as healthy as possible. So let's talk about some cards that I think can be reintroduced to the modern format. It's going to be on a sliding scale. There's cards definitely that are on the ban list that I would want to see unbanned just for the sheer fact of wanting to be able to play with them. But I don't think that it's currently safe for them to come back. So I'm willing to just kind of put out maybe some wrong opinions out there of cards here. You can let me know in the comments down below if there is a card that I don't talk about that you would like to see unbanned and why, or you can tell me why the cards I want unbanned are wrong. So I'm going to kind of go by in this case, for this one in particular, this is like the only cycle that's on here. But I'm gonna go kind of cards I think are the safest to unban and progressively get more like it could stay banned, what have you. Of course, before we get too deep into it and give my reasons, explanations and stuff, please be consider to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you know when videos get posted. There's a link down in the description to my Discord server. You can go ahead and click the link, follow over there, and join up. It'd be really exciting. I love making videos, I love making content, and just kind of like grinding out videos and coming up with new ideas and trying to do things. And I got plenty more in the works, and it definitely makes it a lot easier, with all the support, so please do consider subscribing and that. So okay, so today we're gonna look at cards that I think can be unbanned, and like I said, we're gonna go from I think the safest to least safest, I guess. So the first one I believe is the Den, the original artifact cycle of lands from the original Mirrodin set. So they're all artifact lands, and they all tap for a single color of their respected, color, I guess. So we have Tree of Tales tapping for green, Ancient Den for white, Seed of the Synod for blue, Great Furnace for red, and Vault of Whispers for black. So I believe when these got banned, the affinity decks were very powerful. You had like Arcbound Ravager. Of course, this was like at the inception of the modern format. I believe these cards were banned. So you had, cards like Cranial Plating and Arcbound Ravager and stuff that cared about the number of artifacts that you had. And like Master of Ethereum 2 was another card that like got bigger the more artifacts you had. And you kind of got to trigger Metalcraft on some very powerful cards. You have Galvanic Blast as being like one of the most popular ones to play. Dispatch being essentially a Path to Exile at the time, a Path to Exile with upside, as again the format kind of evolved and everything like that. So these cards just kind of made it easier to grow your creatures, and it came at a low cost because they were obviously in your mana base. You wanted to play these because you were going to use the mana mostly for colorless things anyway. But if you had colored spells that you wanted to play, you could play them because you had artifact lands that actively went towards your game plan, but then also, added mana, allowed you to cast your spells. So pretty basic all around. I think these are okay to bring back now, just because I know we have like the Hardened Scales deck and everything, but as you're gonna know with like a lot of these spells and stuff, there's like one deck or maybe two that are going to like benefit from it right away, and then this opens up the door for other decks to kind of experiment with these sort of cards. So definitely, I think those decks. I mean, they're good and they're powerful, and you have to be powerful to see some amount of play and serious consideration in modern. But I don't know if it gets so much better to where it's going to be busted. So I would at least be willing to have these lands come back into the format and potentially power up some already existing decks in the format, maybe create some new ones. I think the removal and stuff for artifacts are plentiful enough, and I think there's a lot of other powerful things that you can do. I just don't think it really sends anything like way over the edge, and of course we don't know that in particular until we actually get the cards and play with them. So I would not be too hurt if we did see some unbannings, that this cycle of lands gets unbanned and we just kind of see what happens. And I know Wizards is not shy of unbanning powerful things. I mean, we saw them unban Golgari Grave Troll and then reban it not too long after. So I don't understand like why we can't kind of employ that concept here, and at least in a way where I don't think it's going to make the format super miserable, if there ends up having to be like some kind of emergency ban or whatnot. Next, we have Glimpse of Nature. And for a lot of players, if you play like Legacy and stuff like that, and like Legacy Elves, like they play Glimpse of Nature, and they play this card, they already have a ton of dorks in play, and then they just fill out their board full of dorks and end up playing like a Craterhoof Behemoth or finding a way to get a Craterhoof into play, and they've already like dumped every possible creature they had on the board. Now, with one Glimpse of Nature, even like a second one, not very likely. And honestly, like the more I think about it now with the free elemental spells, you can kind of just cast a Glimpse of Nature and then it kind of does the same thing as like an Up the Beanstalk, just now that your griefs and endurances and subtleties and stuff like that get the benefit of being cast. But overall, I mean, I could see if we're trying to promote a creature-based strategy and stuff in the format going forward, then, by possibly banning Fury, which is a card I talked about in my other video, if you want to check that out after this one. I think it's not going to be enough to just get rid of some of the cards that kind of nullify the aggro strategies. I think you have to print some cards that end up encouraging players to want to play with creatures. And while like Elves is like the first deck that comes to mind when like playing Glimpse of Nature, maybe Merfolk decide to play blue again or play green again, excuse me, and they get to cast some of their Merfolk and then they end up getting to draw a few cards. Like if it's just one mana to make the 2 or 3 Merfolk that you could potentially cast on a turn to draw extra cards. I mean, we know how good aggro decks can be and how good decks can be in general if you're just able to cycle in a way your spells and cantrip while also adding to the board. So Glimpse of Nature kind of fits like the bill of what we have seen from the modern Magic card going forward. Uh, Obviously, there is going to be room for abuse in a card like this. I mean, getting to cast a creature spell, draw a card. We have plenty of free creature spells. Affinity is another one that comes to mind too. That you could just play this for 1 mana, and then you have your big cheap like Frogmites and Mirror Enforcers and Sojourners, and you can play Ornithopter, Memnite, and you just end up filling out a board. So it just remains to be seen if something like that would be so broken. Maybe in conjunction, we could definitely put together some concepts that make a deck like that just super busted, but at the same time, I think Glimpse of Nature, kind of in the same vein as like the cycle of artifact lands, should be able to at least get like a chance or at least be looked into and tested to see if it is safer to return to the format. And I think could make some creature decks and like some other creature combo decks very interesting, going forward. Of course, we're trying to limit the amount of things that like we can necessarily abuse with something like this, but I think there's some powerful cards hiding on the list that can come off, and Glimpse of Nature may or may not be one of them. So, going on, we have Green Sun Zenith, the second to last card that we have. And trust me, the last one's probably going to be very controversial. I wouldn't imagine if people call me stupid for that. And maybe even this one too. So Green Sun Zenith, you can pay a green and X, and you search for a green creature with converted mana cost X or less. You put it on the battlefield, shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. So, yeah, for some reason it says shuffle your library, and then you shuffle Green Sun Zenith back into your library. It doesn't make any sense. People just shortcut that. But, anywho, Green Sun Zenith, in particular, like the immediately off the rip, you're thinking Amulet Titan. This is a way that they go get a Titan. They can now go get Colossus. They have their Dryad of the Elysian Grove. They have the Azusas and things like that. Even getting something like a Arboreal Grazer isn't necessarily the worst thing because it ends up being like a 2-mana ramp spell. And if you have multiple amulets in play and you go get a Arboreal Grazer and you have a bounce land in hand, you can make a ton of mana. It already sounds like, all right, Dakota, we're not playing Green Sun Zenith. We can't unban it, whatever. There's a reason why I put this like towards the end, of like the 4 cards that I think would be the cards that I would want to see like unbanned, right? Like I think this card is bordering on like could be too powerful for the format. It is limited by only getting green creatures, but of course we know that green creatures are anybody that is not playing Scam. So Green Sun Zenith in particular, I could see again like some other aggressive strategies, like some other creature combo decks. I mean, like this isn't going to fit into Yawgmoth. It's going to be able to find like the Undying creatures, sure, but it's not going to be able to find Yawgmoth. So like there's like a creature combo deck that's not going to be able to play it. Really, I could see like Amulet Titan and even like Elves and stuff like that getting to pick this up, and maybe even some creative like creature combo decks as well. Just to kind of employ a little bit more diversity in the format in the way of just having more creature decks being involved rather than people playing spells and hoping to resolve like one or two big creatures and then that just kind of like ends the game from there. Uh, Again, this could just be a card that might be too good. I think it borders on there. Maybe as I kind of like talk and convince myself even a little bit more that it could be too good in the format. But again, we're here to discuss and talk about and kind of go through some theoretical avenues of what could happen when you have cards like this in the format. Could it be too powerful? Probably. If it didn't get unbanned or stayed banned forever in Modern, nobody's gonna miss it. Whatnot. I'm not going to be too upset by it, but I think it's at least worth a try to kind of just if we're going to shake it up, let's really shake it up. Like if we're going to make some dramatic changes to these formats, like let's make some dramatic changes in the other way as well as kind of giving creatures more help in the format because they probably need it. So, last one, finally, probably easily the most controversial card that I could like talk about. And I mean, I guess one of like three for like the Modern format, and it's Deathrite Shaman. So while you're thinking Dakota, like we've had Green Sun Zenith, we've had Glimpse of Nature, even like the artifact lands, like you're thinking like all those cards are way better than Deathrite Shaman. And I think in a vacuum, you could be right. Obviously, if we explore like the possibilities, the wide possibility of both the decks, right? We just talked about how Affinity could play something like uh, Glimpse of Nature and draw just a ton of cards and kind of like combo and just fill the board full of creatures, And of course, they could play their little combo of getting a Neoform something, getting Crater Hoof, and just smashing for a ton of damage. All right, we got that. Green Sun Zenith, Titan. We're going to see Titans. We're going to see Colossusism. Even when they get to their small things, they're going to absolutely just ravage the format. All right, cool. No, we get it. Like those cards are very powerful. Deathrite Shaman is powerful in a different way. In a card like a card that could have its own video of just how deceptively good it is. And maybe I'm not giving it enough respect and saying that it could just be unbanned. Maybe it should just stay banned. We saw it like kind of dominate Legacy, where it was like a dork in the Grixis Delver decks of old, where you could just play this and you're already playing a format with fetch lands, you're playing a format with wastelands, you're able to play wasteland like on your turn 2 and still cast like multiple 1 and 2, multiple 1 mana spells or 2 mana spell while also hindering your opponent's mana. But in Modern, the fact that if we're like say in a world we're not going to ban Ren and Six, we're not going to ban the Orcish Bowmaster, we need 2 toughness dorks, and I think Deathrite Shaman then becomes a necessity that could also give some other decks like a win condition going forward, just kind of like an upgrade to like their worst mana dork. I think if you want to promote some of these creature strategies, and of course we know any of these cards could be used, for evil. It's just what Magic players do. We take cool things. They're like, okay, you can finally have this toy, and then we absolutely bust the toy, and like half of it's on the roof, and the other half's in the dryer. Like we don't know what the hell happened. We're here now. Like somebody fix it. Give me a new toy. So Deathrite Shaman is probably a card that could stay banned. Like there's probably no like good reason or justifiable reason to have this unbanned, right? It can exile a land card from a graveyard, you add 1 mana of any color. It's mana fixing. It's going to mess with your opponent's graveyard. It's going to fight off like Ren and Sixes as well. If your opponent's like stuck on like 1 fetch land, but they have a Ren and Six, like playing a Deathrite Shaman on one and just forever putting pressure on that fetch land to where your opponent is going to have to spend a removal spell on Deathrite Shaman. I'm here for it. And the Ren 6 can't easily remove the Deathrite Shaman either, which is kind of nice. On top of that, too, getting to play a black to get rid of instant sorcery to make each opponent lose 2 life, or getting to pay a green and get rid of a creature from a graveyard and gain 2 life. It just has some tools and some options where you kind of fight off some of these other graveyard-based decks with a repeatable source of getting to do it. Of course, you can only do one or the other. You can't eat an instant sorcery and a creature to drain your opponent and then you gain life. But, this is something that kind of can complicate game states and kind of force your opponent to find ways around it and use removal spells on this instead of like some of the other threats. If they deem that this is a bigger threat than any of those cards. My main reason for having it here is that the format has evolved so much. And like really with a lot of these cards, like so much has happened to the modern format. We've had tons of more cards added to the ban list. We've had other cards just get unbanned from the list and come into the format. And really, like of all those cards nowadays, the Stoneforge Mystic is the best card. Objectively is like the best card of all the cards that have been unbanned in like the last like 5 years. So I am willing to, for the health of the format, take a swing on Deathrite Shaman. I think for a lot of like older players that got out of the format, this is going to be kind of a reason for them to get back into it. Play some sort of like Jund deck. Of course, Jund is probably going to play something like this because they'll play anything that has green, black, or red colors in it. But overall, I think that this would be something that you're willing to experiment. You can even like have like a caveat in this that like there'll be like a 2 to 4 week window, if you really want to emergency ban anything, and you can kind of like have your own set thresholds to cards being like too good, and then you just like, okay, like let's get rid of them. And unfortunately, that's kind of the risk that you take as a player, is if you try to you get these cards to like play certain decks that are just absolutely busted, and it just doesn't end up working out. They end up just being too good. So unfortunately, that's the risk we take as players, and a risk that I'm willing to take as a player is to reintroduce Deathrite Shaman to the format and just see what happens. I mean, this is definitely of the 4 cards, I think the closest to like let's just see what happens, and kind of like the Golgori Grave Troll like idea of just like let's reintroduce it, let's see what happens. And yeah, I mean that's my thoughts, opinions. 4 cards that I believe could be unbanned and at least should be tested in the modern format. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, of course you want to see other modern content, Pioneer, all that, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed stuff like this, and go into the description down below, join the Discord server with the link in the description. That's gonna do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.